Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this video, we'll be looking at Azure Policy. So Azure Policy helps organizations to enforce standards and also to assess compliance at scale. So it actually evaluates resources in Azure by comparing the properties of those resources to the business rules itself. So the business rules actually described in JSON format. We call it as policy definitions. So if I quickly jump over to Azure portal, so here I'm in Azure portal. So you can search for policy in search bar, and under services you can see policy in place. Click on that. So this is the dashboard you'll see when you navigate to Azure Policy Service. So the left hand side you can see the overview, compliance section, remediation section, and under authoring you can see assignments, definitions, and exemptions. So here you can see the scope itself. You can kind of drill down to the subscription and the resource groups granularity. If I click on that, you can see right now I have chosen a particular subscription and a specific resource group in the scope. Okay, so what these policy definitions are. So under authoring, let me click on definitions. So here you can see there are many built-in policies provided by Microsoft. So you can search for the built-in policy itself. So for example, let me search for a policy like add a tag. Okay, so adding a tag to resources, add a tag to resource groups. Let me hide this for a moment, and add a tag to subscriptions. So these are some of the built-in policies provided by Microsoft itself. So if you click on the policy definition, add a tag to resources, for example, so you can see the JSON definition itself for that particular policy, inbuilt policy. So you can also go ahead and create custom policy definitions as and when it demands. So here you can see the definition itself with the properties and the parameters, the tag value, and the policy rules itself. And under assignments, you can see what are all the current assignments for this policy definition. So right now you can see I have scoped it to one of my subscription and a specific resource group. I'll show you that in a moment. And under parameters, you can see what are all the parameters that are part of this particular policy definition. Let me close this. And you can also try and drill down to built-in policies that are already available specific to a particular category. So for example, let me search for policies specific to storage, right? So I can go ahead and do that. So I click on storage, and here you can see the built-in policy definitions for storage account itself. So something like you can see some of the policies like storage account keys should not be expired policy, and if I scroll down you can see Azure file sync should use private link, and let me expand this. Storage accounts should restrict network access. There are many policies in place. You can go through those. Let me close this. Okay, let me come back to my presentation. So we saw the built-in policy definitions, and we also saw a compliance dashboard. So it actually provides an kind of aggregated view to evaluate the overall state of your infrastructure. So with the ability to drill down to the per resource, per policy granularity. So if I come back real quickly to Azure portal, click on policy. So here you can see the dashboard for that particular scope in my case, it's a specific subscription and a resource group itself, right? So if I need all the resources, I wanted to have a look at the compliance for all the resource groups in this subscription, I can go ahead and do that. So the scope needs to be changed here. Then you can see all the resources, whether it's compliant or non-compliant. Okay, and on the left side you can also see there is a compliance section. You can go over there and you can further drill down here to the different scopes, types, whether it should be a initiative. Initiative is nothing but a set of policy definitions that it holds. And also you can further filter by the compliance state itself, whether resources you wanted to look at the compliant resources or non-compliant resources, and so on and so forth. Okay, so and also we'll come back shortly to remediation and all. So under authoring, if you can click on assignments, you can see the list of policy definitions and the current assignments itself. So currently in this scope, I have one policy assignment, which is add a tag to resources. Okay, if I click on this particular assignment, add a tag to resources under this particular scope in the subscription and the resource group. So if I click on that policy assignment, you can see the parameters that we are actually enforcing to those resources in the resource group scope, which in my case it's the subscription and the specific resource group. So here you can see the parameter and the value tag name and the value that we are enforcing. So under remediation, you can see I had a remediation task to kind of go ahead and modify or add the resource tag for all the resources in this specific resource group. So let me go back. So let me try and see if I just show you to familiarize yourself with how we can actually go ahead and create a policy itself first place. So let me go ahead and click on assign policy. So this is the wizard you get to assign a particular policy. So the first thing which you want to select is the scope. So right now it shows my subscription. You can click the ellipsis and you can see I have different subscriptions in place. You can go ahead and select which subscription you want to assign this policy to. And under resource group, you can select a specific resource group, but this is optional. So it all depends on how you want to enforce the policy to your organization. Either you can choose a specific resource group where this policy will be assigned to. Okay, so I can go ahead and select a test GRP resource group that I hold in this particular subscription. So go ahead and select. You can see the scope now changed to a specific resource group. And also you can provide some exclusions. So optionally you can go ahead and select a specific resource in these subscription and resource group to go ahead and kind of exclude this policy. So right now in this resource group I have ASP plan, okay, the app service plan itself, and a couple of test websites, app services, right? So if you don't want to apply this policy to any specific resource itself, you can go ahead and do that and kind of exclude this in your policy. So for now, let me click on cancel. And under the basics, you should choose the policy definition itself. So let me click on this. So you can further try and filter whether it should be a built-in policy or if you have already created any custom policy, you can go ahead and do that. So let me search for some of the policies, right? So some of the available built-in policy definition. For example, let's take add a tag to resources. If I say add a tag, I get 3 policy definitions which are inbuilt. So adding a tag to resources, add a tag to resource groups, and add a tag to subscriptions. So you can go ahead and choose whatever policy definition that you want to enforce. For now, let me click on add a tag to resources, and assignment name has been captured automatically. You can provide the description, and the policy enforcement by default it's enabled, and if you want to create this policy and have it in disabled state, you can go ahead and do that and enable later. That can be done. Okay, so let me click on next. So since this policy definition, what we chose is add a tag to resources. Under parameters, you can actually provide the tag name and value which you want to enforce, right? So yeah, under parameters you can provide some sample tag name like department, and the value, tag value as something like IT. Okay, and let me click on next. Okay, so here see, this remediation task will be applicable only to kind of deploy if not exists and modify policies only. So what do I mean by that? So let me close this for a moment. So if I go to policy definitions real quickly, so if I can search for a policy, say add a tag we have just seen, sorry, so you can click on this policy definition, so you can see what are all the available effects. So here you can see what are all the available effects for this policy definition. Okay, so remediation task can be created only for a couple of effects like modify and deploy if not exists, right? So for deny effects, right, so you cannot go ahead and create remediation task. So this we can see we are trying and enforcing a tag on existing resources in a resource group which has modify effect. So you can go ahead and kind of go to the policy assignment section. If I click on add a tag to resources assignment, which I already have, so here you can see you can go ahead and create a remediation task to kind of enforce this policy across your subscription and resource groups. So I already created a remediation task when I assigned this policy to a specific scope. So if you can see here, I had a remediation task which was already completed here. If I click on that remediation task, let me go back to remediation blade. I go to remediation blade here, so I can see the policies to remediate, right? So I already had this remediation task created. If I click on this remediation task, which you can see here, so the status is succeeded. So I already created this remediation task itself, okay, and the status is succeeded. So as a part of this remediation task, the tag was applied to all the resources in a specific scope, right? So we can go ahead and verify that. Let me close this. So you can see the scope is to a specific resource group in my subscription. So let me go back to the resource groups. Let me go to test GRP, and you can see I have an app service plan and a couple of app service test app services. If I click on a specific resource, you can see the tag has been applied. Okay, so department is IT for all the resources in this resource group. So Let me go back to policy real quickly. Under assignments, when you try and assign a policy, we were looking at remediation, so you have to first choose that. So let me go through that real quickly. Choose a test grp group on select, and policy definition, add a tag to resources on select, click next. You can provide, as I said, a specific tag and value that needs to be enforced. And if you go back, go on to remediation. So here you can see, you can go ahead and create a remediation task here, okay, during the policy assignment itself. So what policy that needs to be remediated? So you have to check this, and managed identity. So you have to kind of go ahead and create a system assigned managed identity or user assigned managed identity. So this is something like we are providing the Azure policy itself to go ahead and kind of modify the resources in the resource group. So for that, Azure policy needs a managed identity. Okay, so we have to specify the identity location for the system assigned managed identity, and the role will actually be automatically given. So this particular identity will be given the following permissions, which is the contributor. If you can see the note here, the role assignments, the permissions are actually created based on the role definition specified in the policies. So you don't want to do anything about it. So when you go ahead and create a system assigned managed identity, so the permissions, required permissions, will be given to Azure policy to enforce the policies onto resources itself. Okay, so let me click on next. Then you can actually provide a non-compliance message if you want to provide it to your user, right? And then you can go ahead and review and create. You can go ahead and do that. So for now, let me click on cancel. So I already have a policy in place. So we just verified as a part of this add a tag to resources assignment, I was enforcing a particular tag and value, which is department and IT, to all the resources in this specific scope itself. And if you want to create another remediation task, okay, so you can go ahead and do that here by clicking on create remediation task. Okay, so let me come back to let me go ahead and change the, let me come to compliance section, or let me click on overview. Let me change the scope now and provide all the subscriptions. I have a couple of subscriptions here. So one thing which I wanted to show you here is, there is, if you can see here, I have another policy in place, which is require a tag and its value on resources. Okay, so let me click on that. So right now I'm enforcing it across a particular subscription. The scope is at the subscription level, right? So here, if I look at the definition of this particular policy, right? So here you can see the available effects, so which we have just discussed, right? The available effects is deny, right? So the earlier policy that we have seen, add a tag to resources, which is a modify effect. Okay, so that has remediation task, and we also created a managed identity to go ahead and give the required permissions for Azure policy to enforce the tags onto the existing resources in a specific resource group scope. This policy definition, we are kind of telling, enforcing the resources that are going to be created in the future. Okay, this doesn't apply to the existing resources. Okay, So it will be a deny effect. So whenever I try to go ahead and create a specific resource in this scope, so I'm actually restricting the tags. Okay, so if I come to the definition here, so you can see the definition, JSON definition here for this policy. If I click on assignment, so here you can see I have already assigned this policy definition to a scope, which is Visual Studio Enterprise subscription itself. If I click on this assignment, okay, what I'm doing is you can see the parameters, the same tag name as department and tag value as IT, which I'm trying to enforce. Okay. You can also look at the compliance section. Okay. So these non-compliant resources or existing resources in my subscription itself, right? So let's do one thing. Let me go ahead and create a specific resource, maybe storage account, and try and see if you're able to create the storage account. Okay, so let me close this. Let me come back to home. We try and create a resource. We search for storage account. Click on storage account. Don't create. Okay, so we saw there is a policy at the subscription level for this subscription which I have, and it requires a tag, specific tag and value. Okay, so which is actually a deny effect. We're not looking at a modify or deploy if not exists effect. So those effects are kind of for the existing resources. We are kind of enforcing and kind of modifying the existing resources with the remediation tag, sorry, remediation task. So here we have a different Azure policy which is require a tag on the resources, right, that we are creating in this subscription. Let's try and see. Let's choose this GRP12 I have. Let me provide account name. Okay, so the region, so I'm going to leave everything as is. Let me go advanced networking, leave everything as is, production, encryption, tags. Okay, so here you can see there is a policy validation error. I see here. I highlight this real quickly. So you can see here there is a policy validation error and the details below. So policy enforcement value does not meet requirements on this resource. Okay, the field tag name department with the value IT is required, right? So it's kind of enforcing this policy that we already have in place. Let me go ahead and provide, let's try and see if we can provide a different name this time. So instead of department, providing DEPT and value as IT. Let me try and see if I can review and create. It says validation failed, required information is missing out. I need to provide a particular tag which is department and IT itself. Sorry, give me a minute. Okay, now you can see the error is gone. So this policy which we just saw require a tag on a specific resource across the subscription scope. Okay, so we are restricting the user to provide a specific tag and tag name and value whenever a resource is created in that particular subscription. I want to review and create. It's running the final validation now, and the validation has been passed. So okay, so I hope it makes sense. We close all this and come back to Azure policy. So this is the policy we just saw, which requires a tag and its value on resources. Okay, so if you can see, there are 20 non-compliant resources, existing resources in this subscription scope. There is one compliant, so which I already created with that particular tag and value. Okay, department and IT. Okay, so let me come back to presentation real quickly. So we just saw how to bring your existing resources to compliance through a remediation task for existing resources. The one example we saw is add a tag to resources, right? So to kind of enforce a tag name and value, which is department and IT, to all the existing resources in the subscription resource group scope. Okay, and we also saw how to automatically remediate for new resources, right? So require a tag and value for the resources that are going to be created in future in a particular subscription scope. Okay, let me move on. So the use case, yes, we saw from governance aspect. So implementing governance in an organization for resource consistency, compliance, security, cost, and management, right? And one thing to keep in mind, Azure policy should not be confused with RBAC, which is role-based access control. This is critical. So the key difference is, as we know, Azure policy evaluates the state of your resources, right, by examining the properties that are represented in resource manager or the properties of resource providers, right? It doesn't restrict any action on the resource itself, right? So it's just evaluating the properties against the business rules, which is your policy definition itself, and you can see the compliance of those resources. Okay, and also with the remediation tasks, you can go ahead and do a bulk remediation of what you need to do, right? So like the one example we saw, apply tag on all the existing resources itself. But it doesn't restrict any action itself. But when it comes to RBAC, is something different here. So it actually, focuses on managing the user actions at different scopes, right? So a control of action is required in your organization. You need to go ahead and provide a specific access, right? So with the help of Azure RBAC. So in another video, I'll be showing you what Azure RBAC is in detail. So in this video, I'm not going to get in detail of that. Okay, so whenever a control of action is required, you need to use Azure RBAC. So this shouldn't be confused with Azure policy. It doesn't restrict any action. All that it does is just evaluate your resources and show us whether it is compliant or not. Or you also have some of the policies to kind of restrict the users and kind of enforce the user. For example, provide a specific tag and value when they try and create a resource itself. Okay, so imagine if an individual has access to perform an action on a specific resource, and imagine if the result is a non-compliant resource, right? Azure policy still blocks the create or update. Okay, so that we need to keep in mind. So whenever we need to kind of create an Azure policy from governance aspect, shouldn't be confused with Azure role-based access control. Okay, so let's look at few things like how we are controlling the response to an evaluation, right? So how organization need to control the response to an evaluation. So let me jump over to Microsoft documentation real quickly. Okay. So here I'm in Microsoft official documentation. So let me highlight this. So here you can see the business rules for handling non-compliant resources. It actually vary widely between organizations. So it all depends on organization how they want to respond to a non-compliant resource with a remediation task. So they can kind of go ahead and deny the resource change. So these are some of the examples. Microsoft is providing log the change to a resource, alter the resource before the change, or alter the resource after the change, or deploy related compliant resources. So these are some of the actions that can be performed for the non-compliant resource itself. Okay, so let me come back to the presentation and understand the evaluation outcomes. So see, you need to understand the trigger, right? So when you create a Azure policy, right? So when the policy gets triggered. So for the following are the times or events that are that cause a resource to be evaluated, right? If I highlight this, so the standard compliance evaluation cycle is actually every 24 hours. Okay, and some of the other events, like when a resource is created or updated in the scope, like in our case, a subscription and a resource group with a policy assignment. So the policy gets triggered. We just saw that a policy or initiative is newly assigned to a particular scope, or a policy or initiative already assigned to a scope is kind of updated. Okay, so let me come back to the presentation real quickly. So we saw how to remediate the non-compliant resources, right? With a remediation task, you can go ahead and do that for the modify and deploy if not exists kind of effects, right? And some of the recommendations Microsoft is providing for managing your Azure policies. If I jump over to documentation real quickly, so there are some of the recommendations, right? So you should probably start with audit effect. Okay, so instead of a deny effect, you can probably start with the audit effect to make sure just have a look what are all the resources in your infrastructure that are non-compliant, right? So imagine if you're kind of going ahead and creating an Azure policy with deny effect, right? So, and if you have scripts already in place to auto scale your applications, then a deny effect may kind of hinder your automation, right? So always probably start with an audit effect. Probably with you can search for inbuilt policies that has audit effect, and then kind of assess the compliance across your organization, and then you can go ahead and create the required policies to enforce. Okay, and also please consider the hierarchies, right? So when you create definitions and assignments, so Microsoft recommends you should probably try and create definitions at the higher levels, like the management group or subscription level itself. Okay, and also some of the recommendations for initiative definitions here, if I can highlight this. So wherever you create even a single policy definition, you can probably go ahead and have that policy definition under the initiative definition, right? So that's the best practice. Let me come back to my presentation. So we also saw some of the built-in policies that are already available by default. So I jump over to Azure portal. So under definitions, blade, you can see there are many built-in policies provided by Microsoft already. Okay, so you can kind of filter it based on the category, or go ahead and search if you want to. Okay, and I also wanted to show you one policy real quickly. So let me come back to assignments. So I have a policy like not allowed resource types. Okay, that is a policy assignment. So in this policy, I'm saying try and just deny all the storage accounts that are going to be created in a specific scope. In our case here, it's under a specific subscription and a resource group, which is demo VM underscore group. Okay, so here you can see the list of resource types not allowed. The Microsoft resource provider, which is Microsoft storage / storage accounts. What we'll quickly do, let's try and create a storage account if you're able to under the specific resource group and subscription scope, and see if this policy is enforcing or restricting us to create the storage account. Okay, or you can look at the compliance, you can click on view compliance and check the compliance. Okay, that I can see one non-compliant resource as of now in that specific scope. Let me close this real quickly. Let me try and create a storage account. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. Try to create a resource. Click on storage account, create. Okay, so I've just shown you under Visual Studio Enterprise Subscription, demo VM group is what I need to select. Yes, so here you can see that immediately after selecting the resource group in that subscription, I got a message here, a policy validation error. So policy enforcement in place, value doesn't meet the requirements on resource, which is storage account can't be created in this specific subscription and resource group scope. Okay, and that denies the further action. Okay, let me close this. Okay, so in this video we looked at Azure policy and we looked at some of the built-in policies already in place and how you can assign that to a specific scope, to a subscription or a specific resource group under the subscription. And I've shown you some of the definitions like add a tag to resources, require a tag and value on resources, or not allowed resource type. Those are some of the policy definitions that you can explore. Okay, and we also saw a remediation task that can be created for modify and deploy if not exists effect types, right? So that based on the policy definition that you're choosing. Okay, so you can go ahead and create a remediation task to kind of enforce the policy to your existing resources in a specific scope. So I hope you find this video helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, hit on bell icon to get notified on future videos, and share it with the Azure community for the benefit of others. Thank you so much.